And now, Move the Sticks with Daniel, Jeremiah, and Bucky Brooks.
What's up, everybody? DJ Bucky here with Move the Sticks, a little Super Bowl 50 recap show, Buck.
An amazing game. I know on the surface.
It was an ugly game.
It was ugly. It depends on how you look for it. If you're looking from an offensive standpoint, it was ugly. If you appreciate defense, I thought it was a great defensive game. It just depends on what your vantage point is.
No, look, it was a dominant defensive performance, really, by both teams, but it was not a pretty game to watch.
No, it wasn't a clean game. Too many penalties, too many turnovers, not a lot of points that we're accustomed to seeing in a championship game. But if you can appreciate defense and appreciate the way these teams were built to play defense, I certainly think you can come away impressed by what both sides were able to do.
Before we dig in here to the nitty-gritty on this game, Buck, we both called Carolina, right? So we both missed on this one.
Yeah.
Now, I know when I look at myself and say, look, I was hesitant to buy in Carolina until we got to this point, and all of a sudden I said, okay, I'm just going to buy in. Cam Newton is going to be able to make everybody around him better, and they're going to make it work because defensively, I didn't think Denver could really move the ball against them. I thought their defense would be fine, and I thought Cam Newton would just kind of find a way to get enough offense. Turnovers.
Yeah, turnovers ultimately decide every big game. And in doing this, because I did a 5-point plan for both teams. For the Broncos, I talked about containing Cam, being able to run the football, force Cam to play from the pocket, make some of those other guys make plays. And if you really look at what the Denver Broncos were able to do, they were able to win in all those areas. Force Cam to throw the ball 41 times. He had to throw the ball from the pocket. That's not what he necessarily wants to do. Contained the running game, didn't let them get loose with the read zone and the zone read run game. And then they were able to force turnovers. And the Broncos were 9-0 when they forced 2 or more turnovers. When they win the turnover battle, like it's a done deal. And what we were able to see, that defense got cranked up. They were able to rush with only 4, even though they did mix in some blitzing. They dominated the point of attack, and their edge rushers showed why it's important to have pass rushers in this game.
Yeah, and to me, Peyton Manning is down the line of reasons why this team got to this point and ended up winning the football game. We'll get to Peyton on a little bit later on in the show, Buck, but we focus solely on Carolina, and you were going to say they really lost the game because of this. We mentioned the turnovers, but it was more than just the turnovers. We had some drops. We had a lot of issues with this offense.
Yeah, they lost because I don't feel like the supporting cast showed up and played well. I don't feel like Cam's guys showed up and gave him an A-level performance, which is what you need to win the championship game. Cam didn't play his best game, and I will be the first one to say that wasn't the cleanest or sharpest game that I saw from him. But I will say the drops, the fumbles, the pre-snap penalties, and then the lack of pass protection prevented him from really playing at his best. And when you think about the Carolina Panthers and the way that they have been able to win and to get to this point with a 17-1 record, they have been able to do it because they dominated the turnover battle. Number one, in the giveaway takeaway margin, they did a great job of starting fast, outscoring more points than anybody else in the first half. Being able to play with the lead allowed their defense to really play after the ball. And in this game, they fell behind early, and they never were able to dig themselves out of that hole, and it prevented them to play the kind of style of play that they like to play.
There were a couple plays here that was really indicative of the whole day for the Carolina Panthers, and I know we're going to get to Ted Ginn's drop, which ended up being an interception here in just a second. Let you break that down, Buck. Before we get there was another play earlier on in this game. Ted Ginn catches a dig route and ends up turning up the field. And I don't know why this bothered me as much as it did, but this is the Super Bowl, okay? This is it. You've got one shot at this thing. And he turns it up the left sideline and just kind of cruises out of bounds. Look, it wasn't going to get that many more yards. Maybe he left 3 or 4 yards on the field. But to me, it was just like, man, those are precious yards in this game. You got to fight for every single inch. And he just kind of voluntarily went out of bounds. I think he did it another time as well. And you look at the ball on the ground. We can talk about Cam not going forward. And another time you saw Ted Ginn not really get down there soon enough. And Trevathan ends up diving on the football. It just seemed to me like, just from an effort standpoint, I was a little bit disappointed from Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple different things showed up in that game. In the biggest game, you have to play your best, and it has to be that urgency that this is the last game that we're playing. This is for it all. You kind of have to empty the bucket, as we say. And so I did make notice of what Ted Ginn kind of scooting out of bounds. And on that big play that you allude to in particular, I think it was a 43-yard gain.
Yeah.
I wanted to see him test.
Cut back, yeah.
Because if he cuts back with his speed, I want to see him just try and test him and see if he could get it done. But when it comes to Ted Ginn, the bad Ted Ginn also showed up, not being able to catch the ball on this play, on this dig route, not being able to snatch the ball, not being able to pluck it, really led to a turnover, a critical turnover, because in the third quarter, the Carolina Panthers were moving the ball down the field. They had the ball in scoring range twice. They missed a field goal, didn't cash in here. I felt like the game, now I don't want to say the momentum changed, but I think they missed on some great opportunities, and because of that, they found themselves on the short end of the stick at the end of the day.
Yeah, you look at the numbers from the game here. For the Panther wide receivers, only 12 receptions on 28 targets. Obviously, no touchdowns, had 2 drops, which I think you could probably add a couple more onto that
Absolutely.
number. A couple balls got kind of poked out, those 50-50 balls they had a shot at, didn't come down with it. But, man, to me there were a lot of issues with this Panthers team. I thought even offensively, if they could have got some design quarterback runs early in the game, let Cam take some shots, get some of those jitters out. You saw the first throw of the game. He was a little bit too amped up. The ball got away from him. Then he has a seam route a little bit later on in the early portion of the game. He air mails it. Would have been a big gainer there as well. I just felt like he never got his sea legs under him. It took him a long time to get comfortable.
It's funny that you pointed to that, because I think I tweeted out, I'm curious to see how many times Mike Shula has Cam run within the first 15 plays in that opening script. You being a former quarterback, you understand sometimes you want to get that first shot out the way. Mm-hmm. You want to get hit a little bit so you can kind of settle in and get into the groove of the game. The drive that they had that resulted in a touchdown, Cam Newton ran 2 or 3 times on that drive. I felt like it kind of gave him some juice, gave him some confidence, put him in his mojo, gave him some rhythm. I know that, like sometimes athletic quarterbacks have a thing where they want to prove. This is the play that you talk about, him
just run out of bounds. Yeah.
He never tested 21. He never tested Aqib Talib to see if he can make that tackle. I felt like with Cam Newton, we're going back to the point, running the ball early, design quarterback runs, put him on the edge, let him just kind of get into the game. Even if it's not successful, let him take a hit so he can get into it. They didn't do that, and I felt like he was always struggling to find his rhythm throughout the game.
Yeah, their running attack overall I thought was disappointing when you look at the performance they got from the running back position. You saw the Broncos really mix up what they were doing. You saw some aggressive fronts. There was a lot of double safety blitz in this game. They had their success rushing 4, but then they would dial it up and get really aggressive, just completely eliminated that rushing attack for Carolina. And to me, one of the things they did different than what Seattle had done is Seattle was trying to sit and read and sort and try and figure out what the ball was. Denver and Wade Phillips said, we're just coming. We're coming downhill, and we're going to attack the line of scrimmage. We're going to fill gaps, and we're going to close space. So all this misdirection stuff didn't work.
In going back, some of this is watching the college game, but some of it is coaching in high school ball. When you think about zone read systems, the things that normally trouble teams that run read option is man-to-man and being able to put 5 near the line of scrimmage or a 7-man box versus 1 back sets. I saw the Denver Broncos play a lot of man-to-man because what it does, it takes the RPO game away.
Yep.
We talked about Marcus Mariota and some of the other young quarterbacks that like to stick the ball in the belly of the running back and read the reaction of the defense before pulling it out to throw. Carolina was a team that lived in that world a lot. You saw them hit a lot of the deep slants and the quick inside breaking routes.
Replacement routes, yeah.
They came off of that. By playing man-to-man, the Broncos took away that, and that was a big part of their offense. In addition, they played some 5-man fronts that kind of took away all the gaps, didn't give them those creases in the run game. And because they had some success a little bit, Mike Tolbert had a big run on an inside zone read, but then he fumbled. Mm-hmm. So they never could get back to doing what really was a staple of their offense. I credit Wade Phillips for really setting up a game plan that took away what the Panthers wanted to do, and also his deployment of Aqib Talib on Greg Olsen in critical situations.
Smart.
Really forced him to throw the ball outside, and I believe they felt like they had an advantageous matchup with their corners going against Ginn and Philly Brown while he was in the game.
And not going to spend much time talking about the Broncos offense going up against the Panthers defense. Panthers defense gave a championship performance. They did a great job.
Gave them a chance to win. Turnovers. Twice they penetrated the red zone, held them to 6 points.
Yep.
And so for me, if I'm a defense coordinator, I feel like that's a win. We forced them to kick rather than giving up to 7. I kept waiting for the offense to match them. I kept waiting for the Carolina Panthers offense to kind of give the defense some life. They never could string it together. Part of that is because the Denver Broncos played great on defense.
And to me, Von Miller is the story of the game. And when you watch him in this game, Buck, I think we have a clip here of his spin move. And he wins so many times outside, has that little hesitation move. And then all of a sudden he has you set up. You're going to overset, and he's going to spin inside right here. And it is nasty how quick and how explosive he is. On this one, doesn't even need to finish with the sack. Derek Wolfe gets the cleanup job. But on this play, Buck, we were talking about this a little bit off air, They have Tolbert lined up outside. And I got to believe part of the game plan was, okay, we're going to chip, we're going to knock him off, take away the outside. Got to help your tackle out. You do not want Mike Remmers, going one-on-one with Von Miller on a consistent basis. There were at least three times where Von Miller got pressures and sacks when he had Tolbert out there who did not lay a glove on him. So that, to me, that from a coaching standpoint, you accounted for it. That's just not executing the game plan.
No, they didn't execute the game plan. And give the Broncos credit. Not only did their tactics of being able to bring 4- and 5-man rushers work, but they also were able to what we call green dog. Green dog is when you line up in man-to-man. If your guy stays in and block, you then rush to the quarterback through that guy. And what it does is it adds another blocker. It prevents teams from double teaming and pass protection and doing it. But when you green dog, when you drop Von Miller in coverage like they did on that play, it makes it tough. This was a game where they lined up and said, Carolina, your guys on the outside are going to have to win against one-on-one. And they couldn't do it. It's one of the biggest things that we worried about with Carolina throughout the season. Without a true number one receiver, could those guys get it done? And in the biggest game of the year, the warts finally showed up for the Carolina Panthers. They didn't have a classic number one to be able to win against one-on-one situations. And because of that, Cam Newton, that offense struggled.
Speaking of one-on-ones, I mean, Von Miller and you got DeMarcus Ware, there were a lot of times where they were rushing 4. And a couple times, if you count Tolbert, it would have been a 7-man protection. And they still schemed up a way to get DeMarcus Ware looping one-on-one with Ryan Khalil. And then you had Von Miller on the outside going up against a right tackle, Remmers one-on-one. So hats off to Wade Phillips. But Von Miller, this is not a one-game deal for him in the postseason, Buck.
No.
He's been dominant. 2.5 sacks against the New England Patriots. Comes back with 2.5 sacks against the Carolina Panthers in the Super Bowl. And when you kind of look at his numbers and where they stack up playoff sack-wise, pretty darn impressive.
Very impressive. When Von Miller entered the league, when I went through the draft, I thought he was a guy that reminded me of my former teammate Derek Thomas in terms of his ability to come off the ball, his snap count anticipation and burst, his ability to bend on a dip and rip move to create problems. What he's continued to add to the arsenal, the inside spin move, being able to push the pocket with power, being able to be very, very active and aggressive hunting the ball makes him a dangerous player. And with Wade Phillips putting him extensively at left defensive end or left outside linebacker where he can face the offense's right tackle, which is typically the inferior blocker, they have a huge advantage. It is a great job of scheming, and I think it's something that other teams will take and add to the arsenal. Take their best pass rusher rather than put him on the right side where he's on the quarterback's blind side. Put him on the front side and allow him to work against a guy that is not normally used to taking on speed rushes on that side.
All right, when we look at this defense, Bucky, how do you stack them up? You look at this Denver defense. We have other years, and this is my point, is that we've always said, right, people say, oh, okay, it's not like it used to be. You can't win a Super Bowl with a Trent Dilfer or with a Brad Johnson anymore. And I know Peyton has the name, but when you look at how this team, their formula for winning games, it was awfully similar to what we saw with the Baltimore Ravens and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Absolutely. I think we can go all the way back. We can look at the last few Super Bowls, even the Seattle Seahawks. I know the New England Patriots won. The Seahawks were 1 yard away from winning with a quote-unquote game manager at quarterback in Russell Wilson. You look at some of the other teams that have been able to roll to the Super Bowl. The formula is this, and I know we love talking about the quarterbacks. You are a quarterback. Obviously, it's a quarterback-driven league to a point. The team that is a championship team is a team that is balanced. They play great defense. They're able to get contributions from their special teams. And then their quarterback can make some plays, but more importantly, he doesn't give the ball away. And so if you follow that formula, I think more teams need to follow that because the reality is this. When we look at the college game 2016 draft, are there really any franchise quarterbacks that can come and completely transform a franchise? Highly doubtful. So if you're going to build your team, you're better served to commit your resources to defense, making sure you have a quality kicking game, a strong running game, so that quarterback can kind of play the role of a team as opposed to being the entire team where you build it completely around him and ask him to drive the bus.
Yeah, we haven't talked much about special teams, but the long punt return where it looked like Carolina assumed it was a fair catch, that was a huge play in the game. And then it seemed like there was a penalty on every single return that the Carolina Panthers had, just giving up free yardage.
Giving up free yards. This is a team that has really thrived on winning the takeaway battle and also earning precious yards in the field position game, being able to give their offense short field so they can dial it up. Didn't see any of those things. And the penalties are something that are really problematic because 6 of those penalties were false start penalties. And I understand it. DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller were beginning to have a field day off of those edge players. Michael Orr, Mike Remmers couldn't block those guys. You saw them jumping out of their stance early. It's a huge problem. And it cost them because it kept putting them in 2nd and 15, 3rd and 15. Not prime situations when you're dealing with 2 beasts off the edge, Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware.
All right, Buck, let's real quick here. 2 priorities for each of these teams to get back into this game next year. For Carolina Panthers to get back and win the game, 2 areas you think they need to address.
I think they got to continue to improve the offensive line. I know they were able to get away with a patchwork offensive line. Some people tag this and dub this as a really good offensive line. I thought it was solid for the most part, but they have to play the game a certain way. I think they need to investigate whether they need to upgrade the offensive tackle positions. Michael Orr and Mike Remmers, we saw them finally get exploited playing against elite players. And then in the passing game, Cam needs to continue to have more weapons at his disposal.
Get Kelvin Benjamin back.
I know you get Kelvin Benjamin back. Devin Funchess will be in year 2. He should be a guy. But Ted Ginn, some of those other guys, can they find another weapon that they can use? I like Greg Olsen, but you need another weapon because more teams are going to try and follow this formula. Man-to-man on the outside. Do they have enough players that can beat man-to-man to help them win games when they can't get the running game started?
I would say also, as good as they are up the middle of that defense, maybe getting a lead edge rusher as well. Denver Broncos, for them, they got a lot of work to do, Bucky, with this roster. When you look at some of the free agents they have, and then obviously look at the quarterback position, sorting that out.
Yeah, you got to figure out the quarterback position first. I'm thinking that Peyton Manning is going to kind of ride off into the sunset. We've seen the best that we're going to see from Peyton Manning. I don't think there's any way he can come back and play better than the way that he's played at the end. Is Brock Osweiler the future? They won 5 out of 7 games when he was at quarterback. He showed flashes and promises. Now you build around him. But again, this team won a Super Bowl because their defense was able to get it done. They were able to run the football. In the games where they run 30 or more times and had 130 yards, they were undefeated. They need to make sure that they can run the ball. I believe that they can upgrade the running back position, possibly in the draft, continue to get better. And even their offensive line needs a little work, a little tweaking.
Yeah, I would say that.
They need to get that done. Gary Kubiak wants to run the football, play defense, play complementary football. They won a title doing it. I think they continue to build upon that.
Got to figure out how to get Von Miller re-upped as priority number.
Oh, there's no figuring out. We're going to slap the tag on him.
Yeah.
He's not leaving.
Yeah.
He's not leaving the building. He's going to get a massive contract, one that will maybe make Ndamukong Suh shudder. Talk about a $100 million player. He's going to make a lot of money. We saw him step up his game in the playoffs. That's when you really get paid, when you do it in prime time.
All right, we got to do it, Bucky. Peyton Manning, when we look at where he ranks all time, I know this is another Super Bowl for him. His numbers in that game kind of comparable to John Elway in that first Super Bowl. He kind of rode Terrell Davis to a W. But now he's got those 2 rings, Buck. So when you stack him up all time, Peyton Manning, what are we talking here? I mean, to me, I know some people have tried to make the case he's the greatest of all time. I don't go there. To me, I've got Joe Montana and I've got Tom Brady firmly in those top 2 spots for me. And then I think Peyton Manning is in that 3, 4, 5. That's where the argument begins.
I think without question he's a top 5 player. I think the rings will prevent him from jumping the likes of Joe Montana and Tom Brady. But you're talking about a guy with 4 Super Bowl appearances, each with a different head coach. 2 rings, even though we could say that the second one was more byproduct of the defense getting it done. And he's one of the guys that is at the top of the list in nearly every passing category in the record book. That means he's a top 5 guy. Maybe he's at number 3. It is an outstanding career. If this was it, he put a bow on it with a championship. I don't think it gets better than that. One of the best players that we've ever seen at the position. He deserves all the kudos and accolades that he gets. However, this is one that his team helped him win. And I think that's okay because for so long, he carried several of his teams to the dance without having the compliment on the other side of the ball to help him get it done.
Yeah, he can definitely ride off into the sunset knowing you finished number 1 in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and wins all-time career at the position. And, by the way, 5 MVPs more than anybody else in NFL history. So he's definitely up there in that discussion. To me, I think he comes in that 3 range, and that's where he is. Not a bad spot to be.
No, not a bad spot to be. 200 wins, most all-time. Says a lot about his ability to lead his team to this winner's circle. And I'm going to say this because I believe that Peyton Manning this year is very much like Kobe Bryant this year. Look, they're great players, but they're no longer what they were when we saw them at their prime. For Peyton Manning to be able to kind of scale back his ego And to buy into the notion that he is a game manager at this stage of his career is huge. Look, we all have egos in this business. We understand what it's like when it's your show. The fact that he was able to kind of dial it back and know that the defense is what is going to lead them as far as they go, I give him a lot of credit because most guys can't get out their own way to do that.
All right, one other piece of news here. We wrapped up the Super Bowl there, Buck. We wrapped up where Peyton Manning ranks all time, but Marshawn Lynch decided to hang it up. Surprise?
Not so much. I think he's obviously hinted at it. He's danced with the notion of retiring the last 2 to 3 years. They didn't make it this year. It would have been nice. I think he would have retired. If they had handed him the ball, they score, I think he would have gone out after being a back-to-back Super Bowl champion. But in spite of that, I think he would go down as one of the best big game performers at the running back position. The way he stepped his game up in the postseason, go all the way back to the original Beastquake.
Yeah,
the way
the Saints
gave that team that identity offensively. A physical, smash-mouth runner, a guy who is their clutch player, not only as a runner but as a receiver out of the backfield. When he was coming out in the draft, I know the debate was about he and Adrian Peterson, and my guy, who is now the running back coach for the Denver Broncos, Eric Studeville, believed that Marshawn Lynch was more of a pro-ready style back.
He'd catch it.
Because he could catch the ball out the backfield. He thought that he would be a better player. It hasn't necessarily turned out to be that he's a better player than Adrian Peterson, even though you could wage debate that they both are equally as effective. His ability to make plays as a runner and a receiver and to give them that identity really set the table for the Seahawks.
Yeah, when I look at his career, Bucky, you look since 2011, you stack his numbers up with just about anybody in the league. I mean, this is a really dominant stretch here. You look at the numbers there, you see them on the screen here, third in rushing attempts, and you look at first in rushing touchdowns and fourth in runs over 10-plus yards. It's impressive. He's got the numbers, but to me that is such a brief period of time that when you try and push this thing forward, and I'll leave the Hall of Fame debates up to Elliot Harrison's of the world. That's not my forte. But I don't know that he is a Hall of Famer. I know somebody asked me the other day, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? I said, no, he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, I guess there's a discussion to be had if he's a Hall of Famer. But I don't think he is. I don't think he did it long enough.
It's tough. He played for 9 seasons, so that's a long time.
In Buffalo, though, that's several years where it was a whole lot of average.
Yeah, I think he had 2,000-yard seasons in Buffalo, but then he really became a guy or whatever. If he makes his way into the Hall of Fame, it's not only because of his merits as a player, but more so because he's kind of a pop culture phenomenon icon. The way that he's embodied as kind of like the lifeblood of that franchise, that could be the thing that kind of puts him over the top. The person that presents him will talk about how this guy kind of set the stage for the Seahawks becoming a great team, a team that we could almost create as like a dynasty during that period. Marshawn Lynch deserves a lot of credit. It's going to be a tough debate whether he gets into the Hall of Fame. He'll get my vote because I think he's a special player, a transcendent star at the position.
Yeah, look, it's going to be an interesting debate when that comes up. And to be honest, I haven't totally dug into all of his numbers, but man, it just seemed like kind of
we'll bring Elliot on in a couple years.
Oh,
we'll have him. We'll have him do that.
He would love that. All right, Buck, that's going to do it for us today. But man, it's almost draft time, and this is
no, it's time.
If you're watching the podcast, you saw we jumped into it a little bit the last couple of weeks. Now it is full speed ahead on Move the Sticks. We're going to crank out a lot of draft content.
A lot of draft content. Like, this is our time. This is what we talk about. We got 2.5 weeks before we get into the combine, beginning to dig into the things. I know you were looking at some of the wide receivers yesterday, immediately after the Super Bowl. I'm compiling my notes on all these top guys, continue to make these lists. And so now it's time because our buddies, our former colleagues, they're already in meetings trying to state their cases about some of these guys, give the background info as they head to the combine. It's a fun part of the process.
Yeah, we might even have a combine show, a little special combine show coming up at the end of the month. But plenty of stuff to get to before that point here on Move the Sticks. That's going to do it for us today. DJ Bucky, we will catch you back here next week.
Thanks for downloading Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. For more, go to nfl.com/podcasts.